From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. Today we're going to discuss how a business can move from a traditional offering and distribution channel into a new hybrid approach. And this hybrid approach could incorporate cloud, SaaS, consumption businesses. It's all about transformation. I'm your host, Matt Shares. I'm the CEO of SBI. Joining me in the studio today for this time is a good friend of mine, Dave Peranich. Many of you would probably recognize Dave because, as I said to him before the show, he's probably one of the top 25 enterprise leaders I've been around in the Enterprise Hall of Fame. So Dave, always great to see you, man. You're over at Palo Alto now, so I guess for those that don't know, maybe if you give a little background on yourself and then a little bit of background on Palo Alto Networks, because you guys are going through an unbelievable run, and I think it's going to be a great foundation for us to have a good show.
Sure. Matt, great to be here. Thanks very much. And I've been knocking around enterprise software for some time.
Yeah.
Started out in the early days at Oracle and inside sales. Went outside at a startup, and I kind of had this big, small rotation. Then went to a company called Remedy and had a great run there, selling help desk software, among other things, into the ITSM space. Then I decided that I had wanted to take a journey down the CEO path, and I had a lot of obvious holes, which people are more than happy to point out to me. And so I went over to Siebel Systems and took on some GM roles. And ended up a good run there, running global alliances, and went and took a CEO job. It was not the stunning success that I was looking for, but it was an incredible learning journey, and decided I was going to do it again. And then I found my way into a company called Riverbed that was really early stage, sensational product set, but who really knew what could happen, but they were on a good trajectory, and had the good fortune to join that, and joined from very early on. You know, revenues around the 20 million, and we rode that one all the way up over $1 billion with some great execution, great luck, and some great products.
That was a good run.
That was a good run. Took a couple years off and found myself not ready to be done yet, and ended up joining the great folks at Palo Alto Networks, who's been on a sensational journey in and of themselves. And the Palo Alto Networks, to your point, is a really interesting business. They started as a classic enterprise hardware company, just like most do. But very quickly, the business has shifted, and there's been a great shift towards subscription. There's a lot of different pricing models associated with this. We've got some of the classic SaaS models as well as we have enterprise hardware, as well as we're shifting into some degree of CSSP, and I think that's going to pick up more as we progress through time. So we've got a really interesting business going on here that's been explosively successful. It's just been a sensation to see and wonderful to be a part of. It's that kind of combination of great products with great vision, makes great market opportunity, great team, great execution, and great timing. It's kind of all there and coming together. But given that, there's an enormous amount of execution and hard work to do to get us from where we are to where we need to be.
Well, Dave, it's going to be a great show, and for those of you that are tuning in and watching, one of the things we always try to do, and I've had the good fortune of knowing Dave for a while, seeing the run at Riverbed, and also watching what he's done at Palo Alto, is we're going to talk about this whole concept of transformation and different distribution models and how you think about go-to-market. So many of the CEOs and the presidents of field operations that we work with are keen to understand how others do it. Palo Alto is a publicly traded company, so I'm not giving away any secrets. When you look at their revenue and you look at their growth rate, pretty easy to tell that they know what they're doing. So for those of you that are watching or listening out there and you don't want to miss the show, you can access our content library. If you're an iPhone user, just download the SBI app, go to the Apple Store, search for Sales Benchmark Index, and now you can get your notifications, use it on your commute, your travel, or if you're going out to get a run and you don't want to listen to music. So let's jump into the questions. So Dave, in this segment, I want to talk about new channels of distribution and just that whole transformation, because when you're growing 25, 30%, and at the scale that you all are, and that many of your peers, whether direct competitors or those sort of in and around enterprise technology are having, things happen slowly and then suddenly. And you wake up and you say, boy, I've got to change my channels of distribution. So Talk a little bit about how you have architected, and over these last couple of years when you got into Palo Alto, just how do you think about that ever-changing coverage model and new channels of distribution? Let's start there.
You know, it's part of the chain of constant evolutions that happen in any growth business, right? In any growth business, there are so many evolutions happening, and they're interrelated, right? We're evolving from single product to multiple products, which we call the security operating platform. That evolution has a lot of implications on sales DNA, sales motions, and the channel motions that go along with that. We're evolving as a part of that from smaller, higher speed, technology-based sales towards more business value solution sales, right? Which also has its own set of implications. You know, and there's a number of these things that are going on simultaneously in the business, and they're all interconnected. So the things that we've seen happen in the channel is, as with most channels, when you start in enterprise hardware, most of them start with a channel model. We, like many, started with a channel committed model. 100% of our business from the very early days went through the channel. And the channel was the classic VAR channel, right? We went two-tier very quickly. So we've got, you know, we work with the largest value-added global distributors. And that was the basis for most of our meteoric growth, with us and them collaborating. And you know, as you do, right, there's a continuum of value add that the channel brings, and some of your partners tend to be extremely high value. They can find things, position the value prop really well and close it, and some are very low value, and you're constantly trying to push up that. And the challenge that you find over time is the ones who have the highest value from the technology front tend to be the ones who also are a little bit smaller, they're more boutique-y, and they don't have as much of the reach or the impact as the larger ones. And you're always trying to get the mind share of the bigger guys. And that doesn't happen until later on, until it becomes evident and obvious that you're a juggernaut, you've got the brand momentum, and that them jumping along with you on this journey will be highly advantageous for them. Right.
So, Dave, on that point, and you talked about the continuum and the life cycle, and I remember this when you were at Riverbed and we were getting to know each other, is we often see folks jump into new channels aggressively, thinking more is better and just add more, and abandon the traditional channels and that sort of continuum that you spoke about. If you think about Palo Alto and its sort of run through scale and up through $1 billion and what that started to look like. So as you sit and maybe use a little bit of reflective thinking and maybe a story or two, how do you balance not going too aggressively and abandoning those traditional channels that, as you said, you went single tier, then you went two-tier, that you know work? So how do you balance that, and maybe share a learning from your career?
Yeah, so for us, this is the kind of thing that has to be thought out multiple years in advance. And there is no notion of abandoning anything, right? There's morphing, evolving, and potentially expanding into new paths to market, right? So when I joined Palo Alto Networks, the channel was a very mature channel from a scale and heft perspective, but the channel program itself was a little bit immature. It was still a volume-based model, and most people shifted to competency-based models to try to drive that additional value out much earlier in their trajectory. So that was one of the things we focused on, was a shift towards a competency-based model that would drive more value, and we're still in the midst of that shift, right? Because this is something you can't do overnight. There's massive implications on the whole ecosystem, but internally at multi-billion scale, there's systems and process implications that are really significant. And so that's one of the evolutions, right? But as you think about where the business needs to go, and those transitions we were talking about to multi-product and to business value, that sort of transition brings to mind alternative paths to market, right? So a path to market that is becoming much more significant for us is the GSI. It's something that was relatively underdeveloped a while ago, and something we're putting an enormous amount of steam in, because that kinds of partnership, in thinking about the Palo Alto Networks value proposition and how important security is in the boardroom, these are the players who are in the boardroom with enterprise risk management practices and with digital transformation practices. And those are the things that we need to become a part of in the thinking and emotions in those plays. Another way to think about expanding the channel capacity and paths into market is our shift into SaaS.
Yeah.
Most of the global SaaS players don't have our concept of channel, right? Their channel exists of a number of partners who may in fact help them find new opportunities into the market,
Yeah.
but more of their value is around the value-added services and the integration they offer, rather than the classic enterprise VAR, which more of their value is the transacting,
Yep.
the implementation of the hardware, the supporting of it, the import export,
Yep.
all those things. And so we're seeing a shift in our channel from those that provide that sort of value to more impact coming from those who are thinking about much more of a services-centric model.
And Dave, do you have, and I guess my last question on this segment, so, I mean, you were very, very surgical with your answer and the recognition of the need to get tighter with GSIs and the recognition of, as you said, we didn't abandon. We're morphing, we're iterating, we're not abandoning, which I think is a great call out as opposed to stop, start, which I think the way some people think. So your peers that are watching and they're saying, okay, Dave, got it. You've had this great run. You're at Palo Alto. How do I know when it's time to make those shifts? How do I know when it's time? Are there 2 or 3 indicators that I can take away, look at my own business that maybe isn't at the size and scale, but that's applicable? Are there maybe a couple things that you would share with your peers?
You know, I've had the great fortune to be associated with growth businesses for some time, right? And so one of the things you find out in those businesses is the second things feel like you're done with the thing you set out to do, you're by definition not done, because the next thing's got to come up and you got to be looking around the corner,
Yeah.
right? And so it's just a constant identification of those things that are going to be necessary as part of the go-to-market models and the market expansion models, and just putting them in priority order,
Yeah.
right? And so, our VAR channel is still the most significant part of our business and the most important part of the engine in terms of new customer add. They have reach that we can't possibly begin to get to, right? So that's going to be critical for us for some time to come.
Yep.
But as you get the phenomenons of cloud,
Yep.
which is affecting everyone, and as we at Palo Alto Networks get more and more into cloud-based services, cloud-delivered services, those are the kinds of businesses that are completely different in nature, and customers want different value.
Yeah.
And so to get back to your point, one of the key things we go after is, how do customers want to buy? And I'm always asking high-level questions. Again, when I meet folks, how do you want to interact with us? What's the best value for you? What role do you want partners to play? Is there an integrator you like to work with? Do you like a VAR partner? How do you want to consume it? And those are the kinds of questions that give us thought as to what kind of change do we need to make and when.
All right, so in this segment, Dave and I are going to focus and we're going to shift our conversation to talent. The last segment, we spent a lot of time talking about the organization, the ecosystem, and the shifting go-to-market. So the way I want you to get your head right around this one is the impact on sales talent when an organization moves into new channels of distribution. We've obviously talked about cloud. We've talked about SaaS. So Dave and I are going to talk a little bit about talent and how we go through that. So Dave, you're now making this transformation. You see what's up in front of you. You're growing, and I say this is the hypothetical you, not Palo Alto you, but I'm a sales leader watching this, and I'm growing 25, 30%. I mean, we're rolling. And I'm looking at the talent, and I'm saying the team that got me from 100 million to 500 million probably isn't the team that's going to get me from 500 to a billion. The team that got me North American growth and scale isn't going to be the team that gives me global scale, and so on and so forth. So talk about upskilling talent, from how you assess, how you bring it together, and also how you transition those that got you to a certain point, but not shatter the glass because he or she was a good guy or a good girl.
Mm-hmm. We had the good fortune that because there was so much growth and so much opportunity for growth, we were able to treat our thoughts around talent the same way we think about the channel, which is there's an opportunity here for an incremental contribution with an incremental organization. And to your point, the people who are the great technology salespeople, who live and die by having the best stuff, and they love to fight it out in the trenches with the technology customer, and they're great at it, and they're super for early stage.
Yeah.
The vast majority of those, but certainly not all, are unlikely to transition successfully to a business value sale model with multiple products that's got to be sold to multiple constituents, and you have to have a organization strategy and a relationship strategy as well as a technology strategy. Different motion, and so and so you need to be cognizant of that. But by the same token, you can't forget about the fact that a sales organization is like a living, breathing entity, right? It's got a soul, and the people who were really important in driving that early stage success are a key part of that soul and that spirit, right? And so while it's obvious that many of them may not play the same role in the future as they did in the past, it's clear that there's a value there, and you need to be aware of that. And you don't just go on this role of ripping and replacing because it's a new day. Because we all know that the new talent you find is not going to be perfect in every way, shape, or form. And B, there's an enormous amount of tribal knowledge that new people need to benefit from the existing legacy troops. So with us, what really started it was we broke out an enterprise organization about 5 years ago. And the vast majority of the hires for that were new hires. And the people who had built the company, many of them scaled and decided they want to go and were good at large account selling and went into the enterprise organization. Those that didn't had the perfect home in the named account organization for which the transaction, it's a highly transactional based, less complicated sales cycle for the most part, although there's a lot of big, meaningful, compelling sales in that organization as well. And so there was a home for both sets of skills. But the important thing to understand is that, it is the rare person who can transition from one to the other because they're different kinds of animals, right? And you need to have the tailor-made team for what's the task today and tomorrow, not what's the task yesterday.
So on that, if I am, once again, a leader watching or a CEO looking at you saying, geez, I wish my head of sales and president of field ops thought that way, how do I set the baseline? How do I actually get into the guts of what's required and the way you separated the enterprise versus sort of more up and down, sort of what I call commercial, transactional component? Did you take that and say, clean sheet of paper, I walked into Palo Alto, I'm going to go talk to customers, spend my first 100 days being Dave, the sort of, observer, watch, understand, and learn, then I'm going to build the scorecard and the set of competencies and go after that? Or was it something where you knew coming in that you already had a blueprint from just everything you'd seen in your previous, 25, 30 years? How'd you think through that?
I tend not to be a I know the answer coming in kind of a guy. I tend to be I've got a bag of different clubs in my golf bag. And they're good for different things at different times, right? And you can't drive with a wedge and you can't chip with a putter. And so, you learn the lay of the land and the context and the lie and then figure out what club to use is kind of the approach that we tend to take. And so, we've done a lot of work on this. And the interesting part of this is, it's really challenging, right? Because you can have major account teams that have outstanding performance and they have a completely different approach than another major account team that also has outstanding performance. And likewise, the approach is very different from the named account team that has just blown it away. And so, it's challenging to boil it down, but we engage in an effort that we call guided selling, in a constant effort to get productivity up. Our focus has been all about how do we get productivity up. We've been looking at it from an org structure perspective, we've been looking at it from a talent perspective, we've been looking at it from enablement, we've been looking at it from alignment of resources, and we've been looking at it from DNA, among other things. And we did do a lot of behavioral work on the best and brightest from multiple different areas and with multiple different approaches, and what do they have in common, both in what they did do and really, more importantly, what they chose to ignore, right? Because time management is the most critical thing you can do. And, and how did they mature opportunities? What were the steps they took to A, understand where they're at, and B, take the next step to get past things? And we built this into a systemized approach that we call guided selling, which is being rolled out right now with some pretty decent success. And it becomes a coaching tool for sales teams based on, help them understand where exactly am I at in the opportunity based on a number of different inputs, mostly systematic, and what are the likely next best steps, because our DSMs, who are our first level managers, are great. We have a world-class core of them, but they can't be everywhere.
Yep.
And we want to provide as much help and lift as we can across the organization. So that's been a focus, and in order to do that, we had to do some baselining work.
Yep.
And are we completely happy that it's black and white and 100% accurate? Absolutely not.
Right.
Is it a start? And are there some real commonalities, both in what people do and what they don't do? There sure are.
Yep. So if you think about what Dave so eloquently put, there's an aspect around setting the baseline when you think about talent, setting the baseline in terms of org structure, which also talks about coverage, which we talked about in the previous segment, how you think about that. Enablement and coaching. I would tell you from the purview that I have, working with the folks that we still see the frontline manager being ignored is the wrong word, but not being as enabled. To this day, in 12 years of doing this, the frontline sales manager is the single most important person in the sales organization. They hire, they coach, they onboard, they develop, and when people leave, especially in an organization that's growing that fast, they oftentimes are leaving their boss. So if you have a takeaway from Dave in that last segment, pay attention to those 4 tenets relative to driving scale and the concept of having a methodology that drives the whole ecosystem, right? You don't have to use the one that Palo Alto does. You have to have your own. But if you don't have one, if you don't have a thundering beat that drives it, you're going to get left behind. So in this last segment, Dave and I are going to talk about the need for and the understanding of roles for specialists and what role do they play in an organization as you think about this changing go-to-market model. So Dave, you've been around specialists, right? You've seen them come in and out. You've seen in different organizations. We'll start at 5,000 feet and we'll sort of zero down. What's the Dave Peranich point of view on specialists?
Yeah, everybody wrestles with this one. It's such a tough one, right? Nobody wants to spend the money. Nobody wants to have the extra headcount. Everybody wants that specialized execution, and they just wish the core sales team could get it done, right?
Yep, amen. Show's over.
and the challenging bit is, you can never overestimate how hard it's going to be to bring a new product line into the market. I had, when I first started doing this, I called around to a bunch of people, and the conventional wisdom at the time was it took 5 years. And 5 years between when you brought something new and when the core sales team was actually good at it. And I refuse to accept that, right? It's not fast enough, it's not good enough. But we've seen that play out a number of times over the years with companies we looked at, right? And so, as I think about specialists, there's basically 3 things which dictate if you need them and what kinds you need. Okay. Thing number 1 is how different is the sales cycle and the sales presentation and positioning, and how challenging is it to learn. Yep. Item number 2 is how different is the buyer? Is it a buyer we currently have relationships with? Is it a buyer that our current buyers have strong relationships with and can influence? Yep. Or is it someone completely different? And question number 3 is how ready is the technology? Because when you've got an early stage company that starts with early stage technology, and you battle it all the way up and you become a kind of a machine that now is bringing in new products, those people who are selling what now is the best thing in the market can often forget about how hard it was in the early days when they didn't have all the features and didn't have the functions working the way they should have, and they had to fight through those battles and work very tightly with products to make a win, right? So when you bring in a new product, it's by definition going to be a 1.0. It's going to be immature. It's not going to be ready for prime time, and there's going to be that same kind of experience. And so they can spend their cycles on something that is owning the market and ready-made versus struggling. And that dynamic drives what is likely to become a failure in the new area if it's competing against best-of-breed suppliers who are startups who can live and die only by selling that thing, right? So that's the tension, and that's how you decide what you need and how much you need.
And then relative to your thought around the 5 years and the people that you spoke to who obviously have a good point of view, if you think about this concept of more, we always see companies when they're going through these transformations that and they're scaling quickly, that adding new products to the bag for the core seller, whatever we want to call them, doesn't necessarily mean more revenue, right? As opposed to, hey, boy, Dave, just get really good at crushing the core, right? This is what we do. We sell security to this buyer with this market problem. We got 4 core competitors. Here's how we win. Here's how we price. I mean, on 3 hike, run the jet sweep, right? Like Vince Lombardi. So when you think about, as you guys have gone multi-product, and you think about the core seller at Palo Alto, how are you balancing that? Because you're still in a market that is growing rapidly.
It's a great question, right? And there's some interesting dynamics about our market in particular that we'll bring up. But when I was back at one of my previous companies, and they were a suite provider, what the new products, and they brought new products in every year, what they did was they ended up keeping the per seat price the same, right? Discounting went up across the board, but they ended up keeping that X amount of dollars per seat value by throwing more things in, right? And that happens a lot in the software business. What we're trying to do is avoid exactly that, right? We have a reality that Palo Alto Networks is the industry's premier provider of next generation firewall and the premier provider of what have become called platforms, and there's a whole bunch of different names. Ours is the security operating platform, and we think it's by far the best. Right? But the key thing for us is we're only at 15% or so market share in the market. Every single part of that market acquisition must be won by kicking out somebody that's already there. There is no greenfield. And it's still quite competitive, and we feel the products are still quite differentiated. So we need to make sure that through controls we put in the system and empowerment, that part of the business doesn't get discounted to bring in new capability, and that all the new stuff wins on its own merits and isn't just a tuck-in, right? You can get traction by tucking things in, but you don't win unless customers actually use it.
Well, and I think on that point, and for those that are watching and listening, you made an interesting comment, right? New products to keep per seat revenue the same, but when you actually unbundle that customer and that seat per se, your economics at the customer level start to go down. Your LTV, while you're getting LTV, you're not getting EBITDA or EPS because you're taking it from X to X minus 20% because 3 competitors have been knocking on the door. So to retain the core business, got to drop price. But oh, hey, by the way, new product 1 and new product 2, and the customer goes, okay, God, that makes all kinds of sense. So Dave, are there 2 or 3 controls that you're putting in from like a field governance, whether it's a revenue desk or deal desk, whether it's certain pricing levels as you think about price compression, like how are you managing against the squeeze?
Yeah, so we are putting a number of different dynamics in place. Point number 1 is for every new product line we put out there, we have the objective to be number 1 or number 2 in the space in a very short period of time, right? And that's possible in some of them, and in other ones like our endpoint space, that's an incredibly fragmented market, right? And so it's going to take some doing, but we're going to own that vision and what it takes to get there, right? And so we need to think about them as a part of something that's bigger and better, right? So step 1 is arm the sales team to really come up with a meaningful value proposition that shows that this product in conjunction with this product is better and more powerful. We have a 1 + 1 = more than 2 than competing products in the market that aren't integrated. And you can do that in the security world because consistency of approach in security and consistency of vision, consistency of security posture, and consistency of outcomes is critical to make things easier and more effective. And so that is one thing that we do. Another thing that we do is we've developed a very extensive deal desk capability that we're investing more and more in every year. And to complement that, we've invested in what we call business value, which is a large group of people whose job is to go out and do financial justifications to assist the field. And these financial justifications can build on the value for each product group. And they also have a model where we show the value of them in conjunction or together is that much higher. At Palo Alto Networks, we do have the capability to replace a lot of existing legacy components that are in people's networks. And so it's really key to grab the value of that, plus the added operational benefit, which hits really in terms of people costs that come in conjunction with using these products that are so well integrated. So, it's a multi-tiered approach. Yes, we have discount controls, but it's really more about enabling the sales team to sell in different ways. Deals Desk helps them with deal structures that make sure that we drive additional value for the new products. And the business value group helps them with justification for why that's a good thing for the customer.
So, Dave, is it safe to assume we were talking about product specialists, and I was going to ask you a question about additional roles? I think you just answered it in that last statement when you talked about these business value consultants, business value folks on the team whose mission in life is to ensure that 1 + 1 equals more than 2 by enabling and arming the sales team. So I've got product specialists, I've got business value specialists, maybe there's even some sort of overlay in terms of, complex selling with multi-product, because that's very, very different, as you and I know, versus being single product. So are those 3 sort of fair classifications as we think about some level of specialization?
And I'd add a couple to them. For new products, especially in the SaaS world, there are significant concerns around, is an enterprise company like Palo Alto Networks ready actually to provide something on a SASE basis that is enterprise grade, ready to go? Because it's a different delivery model, right? And so we need to have a couple of different functions there. One is a customer success organization. We've had customer success for a long time. Our customer success has been all about making sure customers get the value of what they bought out of their enterprise processing. The dynamic for SaaS is different. It's about onboarding and getting them up and running early with the best possible configs, the best possible practices, making sure that they get success early so that they see the value. So when it comes time for the renewal in 1 year, right, that A, they want to renew, and B, they want to buy more, because it's become very apparent that the company is committed to their success and they're getting what they bought, right? So that's a dynamic that goes into this. And the other thing is there are a lot of architectural implications. And so, there needs to be the question asked, do we need architectural expertise associated with these as well? So, it can be a very complex and very expensive model. And so when you put it in place, you've got to have very clear ideas about what you need, why you need it, and for how long, right? As you look at these things, it's quite possible that you do need sales resources and business value resources and SE resources and architect, and all these things for a period of time. But as things mature, the reliance on the sales resources should go down, and they should be able to back out and move on to the next thing. The SE resources, you're probably going to always need some technologists, but you should be able to drive more and more of those specializations into the core sales force over time, so you can reduce the reliance on them. The architects should be moving on to the next new thing, right? And business value, that will probably become part of the core business value machines offerings rather than a dedicated specialist team for that group.
So what Dave just articulated, that was perfect, is in the earliest segment we talked about this morphing and the evolution, the iteration of a commercial model, of a go-to-market model. And I think, Dave, your articulation there around how the need for architecture in maybe year 1 and year 2 starts to go away. And where I see a lot of organizations struggle is everybody gets comfortable. Hey, I need this. I don't have an SC. I don't have a this. Well, what happens? Bloat. Sales and marketing expense creeps. Next thing you know, you wake up and things don't look like they used to, right? And whether you're public or private, there's a different set of conversations. So I think the big takeaway for specialization is you were very dynamic in how you allocated those resources, and very dynamic in terms of the groupings, and always thinking about what is the requirement. I've got a new product, I get why I need it, but my core rep, it's got to be better, because this now is a 2 or 3 year product, maybe 4. It's approaching maturity, and if you're going to be a core rep here, you got to be able to sell it. Else, time to go.
There's an old sales rub that goes, you got to learn to earn, right? And our sales force needs to constantly be reinventing themselves all the time. But by the same time, the complete downside, to your point, of a specialist force is the core sales force goes, I don't got to worry about that, right? And it becomes the crutch. And unless you take the crutch away, you're never going to get what you want out of the core team. But what usually happens is you hit a moment of financial tightness, and you're like, okay, that thing that I've been thinking probably needs to go for a while. It's gone, right? And so you rip out the crutch, and they're not quite ready yet because they've had the crutch, right? And so you have to push it in and make it happen proactively. Otherwise, you're going to run into a kink in the hose, and you don't want that.
Very good. Well, listen, man, always good to see you. Thank you so much. That was a great show and just great insight. So appreciate you and continued success to you and the team.
A lot of fun, and best of luck to you and the great folks at SBI.
Yeah, thanks. All right, everybody. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of what Dave had to say. I know I certainly did. So as always, to the SBI audience that tunes in, you always have a choice of where you put your eyes and your ears, and my team and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for your continued support. And as always, till next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.